Hi, everybody. This is Samantha Steiner again for another edition of our multilingual nonfiction writing class. If everyone can hear me, I'm just making sure that Zoom is connecting correctly and that my camera is on. Let us start the video. This is Samantha. There we go. Okay. So our class luckily has been extended for 2 more weeks. So I'll be teaching this week and then we'll have one final class after this. But for this week, we're going to take a little break from the multilingual aspect of the class and turn more to writing in general. I think what we're going to discuss today is useful no matter what kind of writing a person is doing. It might be particularly useful for multilingual, but I'll leave that to all of us to decide. So the first thing I wanted to just say is that later in this class, we are going to be using two materials that can easily be found around the house. But if, while you're listening, you want to try and dig them out now so you're ready, they are a pair of scissors. Sharp is good, big or small is fine, just regular household scissors. And the other is a plastic grocery bag. To be safe in COVID-19 times, I hope that it is sanitized. You can spray it with a little bit of alcohol, or else if you've been leaving it sitting for more than 3 days, it's probably fine. I don't want anyone to risk their health in order to participate. And if you don't have access to these things, that's fine too. Feel free to just watch and maybe you can participate later on your own time. So, but just anything along these lines, you only need one bag. You don't need more than that. If you want, you can bring more. I appreciate the participation, but it's not necessary. So what we're going to talk about is really the hard days when the writing does not come easily and it feels like there isn't a story to tell, or that there is a story to tell, but it's too difficult to tell. And the inspiration or the motivation isn't there. Writers have different ideas about the concept of writer's block. I know Shonda Rhimes claims it doesn't exist and then says she knows it really does exist, but you have to say that it doesn't exist in order to deal with it. I kind of like that take, but my feeling is that there are going to be some days when the writing just does not come, and that it can actually be painful and damaging to force oneself to write through that. So if you're anywhere near that kind of point, I strongly recommend just give yourself a break. Be as kind to yourself as you possibly can. But hopefully, most days, that's the kind of state that you can ease yourself out of using some of the strategies that we're going to talk about. And so the idea I really want to get at here is what the author T. Kira Madden calls feeding the lake. Right, that we have to sort of nourish ourselves intellectually and spiritually in order to be able to nourish other people in those ways. And so I feel like part of that is taking care of your inner child, whatever that means to you. For me, it's working on my sticker collection, and rereading some of the books from my childhood that I love. Also listening to music I love, that I've loved from any point in my life, including today. Right now, I'm on a big kick with one of my favorite bands, the Mountain Goats. The lead singer, John Darnielle, he is a novelist outside of being a lyricist. And so I feel like he has special insight into using words for specific purposes. I also love the music of Nat King Cole. And so that's just like one way. Like this, I think writers tend to be very critical of ourselves and to say that this is slacking off and this is not doing work. But I really believe that in order to put out our best work, we need to be able to relax into it. I think if you look at Olympic athletes, they might be stressing out right before a meet or an event, but once they're in there, they're totally calm. They've relaxed into the work, and I feel that as writers, we need to do the same thing. That nothing good is going to happen if we're in an anxious state. And so, even if the writing is provoking great anxiety in the reader, as I'm producing the writing, I'm usually feeling calm when it's going well. Other things to do: watch TV and movies because those are lessons in writing. Even if we're not consciously aware of them, right? We can watch a movie and then watch it again and start paying attention to elements we might not have noticed on the first go round, like what is the story on the surface and what is the story under the surface. And kids' movies are particularly great for this because their construction tends to be so simple but so effective. I think a great example is How the Grinch Stole Christmas or The Wizard of Oz. They have really fun stories on the surface and stories under the surface. I believe in exercising as a great way to get the body moving in order to get the mind moving. I find that like going on walks or going on runs um, leads to some kind of inspiration and usually leads to a form of meditation for me. And I'm able to just zone out and then ideas start blooming up in my head. And it's really wonderful. I feel this is not news, right? These are not terribly original suggestions, but they're tried and true. And if they work, why not? Um, and then outside of exercising the body, to exercise the brain. I had a professor in my first year of my MFA program who had us all um, take out a piece of paper during the first day of class and draw a spiral at the middle of the page. Just draw a dot and then extend it outwards. And the goal was to keep the spiral as closely wound as we possibly could, not to allow any more than the necessary amount of distance between those lines, those rings, and also not to let those rings collide with each other. And this felt like a totally mundane task um, that freed me up, freed my brain up to do whatever I wanted it to. And so I feel like, exercising left brain, right brain, um, and doing things that I might feel like I'm not good at. I happen to be very lucky that I love the visual arts. You can, well, maybe not. You can see sort of from my hands that I've recently been working with pastels, and that's really fun. So another thing is to just start learning a new language, and it might not be with a goal of mastering that language. If that happens, that's wonderful. That's more arsenal or more material in your arsenal for your multilingual writing. But it could be just downloading a free trial of Duolingo and picking up 10 new words in a language you don't know. I think that those 10 new words can be the topic of your writing, even if you don't understand the rest of the language, that you can do a little research to find cultural context and then maybe bring in some sensitivity readers. Um, I know some people just like having a new environment to write in. I personally separate as best as I can. The place where I sleep and rest is not the place where I write. Even if writing is fun and it's healing, it's still work to me. And so I make sure to leave my bedroom and certainly to leave my bed in order to do the writing. But sometimes it's a great idea to leave home. And I know now in pandemic times that might be harder, but perhaps to sit in a public park or to go to the house of a friend who is quarantining very, very well for a socially distanced visit, or simply to pick another part of your house or a different mindset by sitting on the floor rather than in a chair. Or at an angle at which you never view your own home. And then maybe some inspiration can come from that, taking notes on what you see from this new vantage point. And on the other hand, I know more than one very accomplished writer who does all of their writing in their bed. One of my instructors told me she likes to lie in her bed on her stomach and have all of her favorite snacks lying in the bed there with her so that she can be as comfortable and relaxed as possible in order to do her work. So it's really a matter of personal preference. And I feel that if you're ever feeling paralyzed because you can't decide what approach to take, just pick one at random and try it out and think of it as an experiment. And then maybe the next day you can pick the opposite approach and sort of take notes on how it goes with either of them. I know people will experiment with try drinking coffee and writing, try drinking tea and writing. Yeah, I think you could keep yourself busy with this game for a very long time, just conducting experiments of how different environments affect how you write and how much you write. I remember reading a column, I believe that it was The Ethicist in the New York Times. Maybe not. It was an advice column. It might not have been The Ethicist. Somebody said wrote a letter in saying, I am an artist, but a visual artist, she said, but I don't feel inspired and nothing is coming and I don't know how to get going again. And the person who wrote back and gave advice said that very often the inspiration comes from the medium. And that maybe if markers aren't working for you right now, you could switch over to pencil or, from chalk to oil paints. You get the idea. But maybe if you're banging your head against your laptop screen trying to figure out what's happening with your word processor, you could switch to a pen and paper or get a typewriter, which is really fun. You have that auditory stimulation of the clicking. Um, but if computer feels like the way you need to go, you can even switch to a different word processor, or use a program like Scrivener, which might have a more professional finish to it. No fancy writing program is necessary to produce great work. But if it makes the work more fun and more easy, the challenge of writing is so great that we should do everything we possibly can to make it easy for ourselves. So I think do what feels fun. And then I have a friend who recommended to me changing my font to Comic Sans and the size to 42, which is enormous on the screen, and that looking at any text written in that font, no matter how serious the content, a person can't take it seriously. And so all of the self-criticism and doubt and perfectionism's kind of held at bay because um, it's just some notes in a fun font on a screen. And so the idea is, this is so fun. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep writing. And then very quickly you have 100 pages worth, even if it's actually only a paragraph. But that feels so good, then you'll want another 100 pages. So if a fun font feels like a good idea, there's a great place to experiment. Um, I personally draw a lot of my inspiration for my writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, from the world around me. And for me, space exploration and astronomy is one of these topics that have always fascinated me, baffled me, sometimes terrified me and intimidated me, but always so interested me. And so for me, I watch lectures by Chris Hadfield, the astronaut, about what life is like in space, how astronauts brush their teeth, and so on. Also, again, another sort of interest of mine is more science related than humanities related, and I feel like this only serves me, right? This only expands the range of what I can write about. Um, but to talk about real life animals that seem like they must be mystical, things like the coelacanth, um, which is a fish that is older than I could even tell you. Um, or a tardigrade, which is called a water bear and can survive in extreme heat and extreme cold, and is so small that you can really only see it under a microscope. Things that exist in nature just fascinate me. Things that we feel like would have to be fiction, but no, they're real. They're out there. Um, Another concept that's sort of caught my fancy lately is the idea of a Karen. If anyone has not heard of a Karen, feel free to Google it and just take a peek at the Wikipedia page. It's pretty hilarious. It's basically a shorthand for an entitled white woman. Your stereotypical Karen has short blonde hair, Gucci sunglasses, wants to speak to the manager, and needs her daughter in the best preschool. And I think it's really funny and like so inspirational, honestly, how the dynamics of like commentary about race are really changing. Another just a sort of fun fact that I feel totally riveted by, that I haven't written about this, but I feel like my writing might dance around this one day. The fact that after World War II, the Russians partied so hard that the entire city of Moscow ran out of vodka. It's a true fact, and you can look it up. Um, but it's like discovering little nuggets like that sort of reignite my interest in the whole world. like my passion for the universe, and make me want to write. So if you are ever feeling low on writing inspiration, maybe see what you can find um, that's interesting, right? And I've heard it said that uh, interesting people are interested. But in order to really have something to offer, you need to be looking for what the world has to offer to you. I'm going to offer just a few more suggestions, and then we're going to take a break and get out our scissors and our plastic bags. So heads up that it's about to come. Um, One of my professors recommended this to me, and I've started to do this, that keeping items with different textures around my writing desk reminds me of all of the sensory details I can sort of tap into in my writing. And so, for example, having something made of real crystal, if you're lucky enough to have something like that, um, right next to something made of cotton, right next to a little piece of tinsel, next to marble, right? Objects that are hard or soft, or shiny or matte, or objects in different colors. If you don't find the colors distracting, if you find them inspiring, or else objects all in different shades of neutrals. But just to make the writing environment something that can feed the writing itself, I think is really fun. Um, And then, just more generally, whatever is preventing you from writing, whatever the fear is that your writing will be too this, or you're distracted by this phone call you had with this friend, whatever it is, write about that. It's a great place to start. And probably you won't be able to write about anything else until you process it. And if you can't bring yourself to write about that, whatever it is that's keeping you, write about why you don't want to write about that. I've done that many, many times. And it's a really great way to take what is weighing you down and use it to pull you up. That whatever does you is keeping you from writing is probably what you should be writing at that moment. And I felt this when I first started to do this. Are we back? We're back. Okay. Let's make sure that we're on YouTube still. Yes, I believe that we are. Well, if you just came in on that and there was a very awkward lag happening, I was singing to keep us entertained while we waited for the sound to come back and for the video to reconnect. So let us hope that it is there. And I apologize if anyone is stuck looking at a frozen screen with me sort of staring in the distance in a very zoned out way. Okay, but we are back on track and we are going to continue here. So we were talking about writing about the thing that is keeping you from writing, such as the doubt or the fear or the distraction. It might feel tempting to try to skip that step and get to the writing that you're ultimately aiming for. But I feel that this works a lot like Piaget hit from psychology. If anyone has heard of, I believe his name is Jean Piaget. He came up with stages of child development, and every kid goes through these various stages. And there is no way to skip them. There is no way around them. There's no way to speed through them or accelerate through them. You just have to go through each one in order to get to the next. And I feel that writing is a lot like that. That in the end, none of it is a waste because all of it was necessary to get you to where you are. And a comment I'd like to make in parallel to that is that if you already know how your story is going to turn out, whether that's literally the plot point of the ending or the final draft will look like on the page, if you can already guess that before you've started writing, then that's probably not a very interesting story. I think the most exciting stories are the ones where we're making the discoveries during the writing. Because if I can guess how it's going to turn out, that means my reader can guess how it's going to turn out. So let's allow room for ourselves to be surprised and to allow a little time for writing and for work that is not immediately tangibly productive, but that is an investment in something that I think is much richer than what we would have if we didn't invest that time. Okay, it is plastic bag time, everyone's favorite time. I'm going to explain what we're doing as we're doing it. But for right now, you're going to want to shake out your plastic bag so it is flat and lay it down on a table or desk or whatever flat surface you have. The floor is probably fine. And then I'm gonna flatten the bag. I try to tuck the edges in, but I'm a little fussy like that. That's not terribly important. I'm gonna pull the handle straight. Just basically flatten it into almost a sheet of paper. And then take your elbow and just sort of iron it. So what we're doing here is making something called plastic yarn. And the shorthand is plarn, right? The P from plastic being attached to the word yarn. You're gonna fold it in half lengthwise and flatten it again, right? So we just have a bag folded in half now. And then fold it again. I picked a particularly small bag, so I might only have to fold lengthwise one more time. If you have a really large bag, you're just gonna keep folding lengthwise until you get something about an inch or two wide, something you can cut through easily with the scissors. And again, just smooth it flat. You might be wondering, what does this have to do with writing, and especially with multilingual writing? But I promise it has something to do with it. What we're going to do is take the scissors and trim off the bottom where the bag gets sealed. Just take off enough there. Then trim off where the handles start. And I'd rather estimate taking off too much than not enough, because you want to make sure that what's left on is really solid. These parts we're going to discard. And this, as in writing, can be heartbreaking to throw away what feels like good material, but we don't need it. And in fact, it's better to leave it out because you can't really do that much with it at this point. Not for our purposes. You might be able to craft it into something else. But for today, we're gonna take this. I'm gonna fold it lengthwise one more time because why not? Writing is about taking the plastic bags drifting in the world, the material that we come across in these odd moments that are considered by other people disposable, and chopping it up about an inch across and honing in on just the material, right? We took away the handle, we took away the bottom. Basically what we have is bag. And it's almost like spinning DNA in a centrifuge, right? To get just the DNA, to get rid of all the other muck that's around it. And so writing is taking the stuff of the world, distilling the central ideas in it, or rather taking the story on the surface and boiling it down to the story under the surface, and then creating something out of it, then making something new out of something old. And people use plarn or plastic yarn to knit and crochet items. People will actually make plastic bags out of this, reusable plastic bags. And so it's a form of cannibalism to take a lot of old disposable plastic bags and make a new plastic bag. But that is what happens. And that is writing, to take the experiences of our lives and invent a new theoretical fictional experience. So we're going to take all of these little pieces we've come up with here and open two of them, just two, and string one through the other. That one is hanging loosely. And then of the two ends, just pull one through the other. It doesn't matter which. and then to pull it straight until you have a rope. And there are so many metaphors about writing being like weaving that I think all apply to this. This idea that if you sit with the story long enough and pay attention to all of the details, every single one of these strands, that it will eventually add up into a much bigger story, bigger picture. The important thing when making plarn is to tie the bag so that it's actually equally distant from the last knot. So if I were to do this off center, we'd have a lot of extra bags sort of hanging off the side. It would not be pretty. So the important thing is to make sure to keep tension relaxed and to keep ourselves relaxed as we work. And so I always knitted and crocheted as a hobby. I find that I keep my hands busy in order to keep my mind buzzing, and that I'm free to think about my writing or think about whatever I want to be thinking about as I work. And so this is a great way to just zone out and meditate and to feel productive as I'm doing it, right? Because even if it doesn't feel like it, I'm making something. And if I keep going long enough and use up all of these little strands of plastic bag, well, after a while, I've got quite a bit of cord here, which I can use to make whatever I want. And a person does not need to know how to knit or crochet to have fun with plarn. People do finger knitting, which doesn't require any needles, just two hands to work with. And you can also, I'm sure, invent some use for a rope or party streamer decoration. But the reason I wanted to share this activity with everybody is that I find it soothing. And sometimes as writers, we get really anxious about our work, and it's great to have something we can turn to that makes us feel soothed. And I think our culture in the US tends to devalue comfort and to prize convenience, right? Like how easy and how fast can something be delivered? But like, what about feeling good about ourselves? And so I think that plarn is a great way to make that happen. Now, that's what I use in my case, but I encourage everyone to find what really works for them. We're going to talk just a little bit more, and then we will call it a day for today. I wanted to bring up the the acting teacher, Uta Hagen. She has a saying of trust your homework, which is that as an actor is preparing for a role, they have to do so much research. And that sometimes it can be tempting to bring up all of that research and to show it off to the world, to recreate whatever habit from whatever century you observed in this one book or one movie. And that as writers, we sometimes have to do a lot of research, and it's tempting for us to just collect every single nugget of research that we can and share it, because we feel like, well, I did all this work, I want it to be worth my while, or else I fell in love with these facts and I need to share them. I need to share all of them. But unfortunately, sometimes that gets in the way of why we are writing in the first place. It gets in the way of the big picture. And so the idea with trust your homework means actually forgetting your homework, forgetting the research, casting that aside for a minute, and deciding to trust that it will show that you did your homework, that everyone will know you did your homework, that it will come off in the confidence of your work, and the confidence of your tone. And so for me, if I'm doing research, I'm generally on a smash and grab mission. I'm looking to get just the things that I need, just the details that I want, and not to lose myself in the research, not to use research as a procrastination method. And that if I pick up some great nuggets along the way, those can be saved for some future project, or maybe they'll never be used, and that's okay too. But that they'll help create this sort of halo of associations around what I am writing. That even if I never actually put down that fact, that it will change the way that I speak about the facts that I do put down in the writing. And so the idea of trust your homework is just not to be precious about making every moment of research or of experience worth your while, feeling like you have to cram everything in. That the idea is everything should be in service of the writing. And if what I'm putting down is clogging up the writing and not helping get the message that I want to get across, um, then let's drop it like the dead weight that it is. Um, a few weeks ago, I had a friend email me a story to proofread, and she said in her email, I'm trying to make this story as chaotic as possible. And I think that's a great writing motto. Let's have fun while we're here. Let's make our stories as chaotic as possible. And maybe we can make it a focused kind of chaos. Maybe we can pose a question with a particular kind of chaos we choose. Or maybe we can throw that idea out the window and really write something totally absurd. And if we don't publish that piece, that's fine. That we're writing. If we're writing every day, we've succeeded. And if we're not writing every day, we've also succeeded. It's really a game of stamina, of long term, not of pressuring ourselves and keeping wimpy goals, aiming to just make sure we're writing every day, not to write 2,000 words a day. If ambitious goals help you, then more power to you. But I've found that they only hinder me. So, with that, I think we're going to end for today. I want to leave everyone with one prompt or informal homework assignment. Feel free to do it or not. Feel free to do it in your head or to do it on a piece of paper. But this is to make a rainy day list for yourself, to write down 6 things you can do when the writing does not come easy, so that you have this. It's great if you want to write it down on paper and tape it to your door or to your wall or put it in the back of your calendar to make sure that it's in a place that's accessible. But it's a backup plan. It's just to know, okay, today I don't feel like writing. I tried writing 5 minutes. I was fed up. I didn't want to do it. What can I do today? And for me, it's, well, maybe I'll spend 20 minutes just making Plarn, or maybe I'll go for a run, or maybe I'll reread my favorite book. So I hope everyone can equip ourselves with whatever will nourish our inner writer and feed the lake. I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy and safe and that we're all enjoying our writing. Take care. Bye.